Okay, in today's video I'm going to talk about landing pages again, specifically on testing landing pages and specifically tied to your PPC campaign, since I run a PPC money-making strategies or PPC strategies channel here. I'm going to talk about landing pages as it pertains to PPC. Now, that all said, everything I'm going to mention here today will be great for anything that you're optimizing as far as product pages, if you're selling an e-commerce product that's of significant value, or a service page that you're driving any kind of organic traffic to or what have you. But especially true with PPC, and this is what I have the most knowledge on, is PPC, because I run a PPC firm. Just as a general disclaimer, we got to guarantee our clients results. So when I have to guarantee results, our clients' results before getting paid, which is what we do here, I go and the landing page is a factor. I always look at the whole picture. You always, when you do PPC, you got to look at the whole package. Is the traffic the bottleneck? Is it the landing page that's the bottleneck? Is it the tracking that's the bottleneck? And you have to look at it from an overall, 100-foot or 1,000-foot level, see which one's the bottleneck, go after that one. Once that's out of the way, you go after the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And once you've done that enough times, you've basically left everybody else in your space in the dust, and now you are going to be the one making millions of dollars a year on these ads, completely self-financed through the revenue that you're generating and the profit you're picking up from these ads. The ads, because at that point, you've simply made more money out of each click than anybody else. The clicks are priced to market, what people are willing to pay for. So by and large, or by in default, you should be able to win the formula for yourself doing that. And that's what we do for our clients here. Anyway, but I want to say, so normally we work with a new client about half the time. I'm doing a new landing page right away. I don't know, maybe 50 to 70% of the time. Why? Because the landing page is so nowhere near ideal. We're to the point in time where landing pages are required now. More so, on top of that, you need multiple landing pages for different traffic sources. You need different pages for everybody to have it really work well in today's competitive environment. But more than that, you got to be able to have the foundation down as to what stuff has to be on this page to have a formulaic result from what you're doing. So when you invest that few $1,000s into a landing page, you're always going to automatically get out of it what you want to get out of it, or an increase in basically your response rates from your traffic, which this formula will work 90+% of the time to be able to do that. Of course, I have a little bit more of a trained eye to be able to spot when a landing page is not as good as it all could be. But even when we do release a campaign, these are the stuff I also, on top of it, always add along with the landing page. Once that's done, to be able to suck out the most value possible from it as well. When you test landing pages, it's like testing anything else, but we test a campaign, the more changes you make, the worse off your results are going to be, because the algorithm hates changes, and you have a risk that you may make a wrong change anytime you make a change. That's part of the package of doing testing. When you test a landing page, it's the same thing. You significantly change stuff on a landing page, you're driving traffic from Google to the page. Ultimately, all of a sudden, that Google's ad algorithm notices this. You have your quality score, which determines what you're going to be paying for a click on your site, looks at what they call landing page experience score, or whether or not somebody comes to your page and whether or not they go back to Google and click on something else, or they stayed on their page, your page, and then they converted, which means they didn't go back to Google and look for something else, overall. And so what you need or should be thinking about doing is doing it right, and don't take any half approaches if you're going to do it at all. If you don't have any results, of course, you don't have, there's nothing to risk. But apart from that, you should have an actual system in place for you to be able to get what you want done, and you're not just randomly testing stuff. You're not randomly doing anything with your landing page. If you certainly are relying on some of these leads, because Seen it many, many times. People make even a change to this landing page. It screws with the algorithm. The algorithm sends people half the amount of leads that they had before. They have 5 sales guys. All of a sudden, their sales guys get pissed enough to where 90 days later, before the whole system can react, somebody leaves. Or, basically you lost a whole bunch of money because you have certain overhead to fulfill. So for the most established businesses, you can't afford this. This is going to be able to take you from A, where you're at now, to B, 200 to 500% higher response rate on the same exact traffic you have coming into your PPC, from your PPC campaigns right now to your current landing pages, with basically as little of messing around and effort and cost and risk and worry to be able to do that for yourself, given that you, again, either aren't getting the ROI that you're looking for right now, or you simply just want to be able to get that 200 to 500% more on top of what you're doing. Of course, if you haven't messed with your landing page at all, or it wasn't built by an expert, you're closer to the 500% increase range, whereas if you have already, it's closer to the 200%, just to let you know in advance. But those numbers are very real. They're real enough, I know, because again, I do landing pages on more than half of the campaigns that I work on initially, just because it's just low-hanging fruit. It's actually easier to improve a landing page than it is to improve a campaign. Once you know what this whole system is, and you've went through it, as many times as I have, and just understand exactly what kind of result you're going to get out of your process once you've actually went down the road to start executing it. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about just testing in general, but more specifically, when you do landing page testing, what you're going to test first and kind of what you want to do with that landing page to get you from start to finish as safely and as quickly as possible for your brand. So anyway, as usual in my videos, I have a short list of things that I want to cover here, the do's, the don'ts, how to actually get that 200 to 500% increase in ROI from your landing page very quickly and as easily as possible for your brand. So the first thing to mention here, background. Why split testing your site or landing page is not a random endeavor. So, as I was kind of alluding to before, what I see people doing wrong all the time is they don't know anything about landing page testing, and they go out and they try to test a landing page or make one, which is definitely, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's only one way to learn. And through process of elimination, you eventually will learn the right way to do it, but there might be a lot of pain. So you don't want to go through this randomly. You want to do in a very measured approach, so you don't go too far backward to go forward, and you're most likely to go forward instead of backward, so along the way you aren't losing a bunch of money. And so there's a process to that, and this is what I'm going to explain what that process is. It's easy to lose revenue when, of course, you're wrong to get ahead, and we're not talking about little. We're literally talking about if your PPC is 80% of your sales coming in, and all of a sudden you throw up a page that's crap, or same thing could happen with the site redesign. I see people do that all the time too. They redesign their site. They don't know anything about conversion psychology and how to getting high conversion rates from a website. Landing pages are the same thing. They do it. Ultimately, like with anything you're changing on your PPC, it'll take 30 to 60 to 90 days before you realize you made a bad move on making a landing page. Then you got to reverse it, and the algorithm is still going to be messed up for you at that point. And it's going to take another 30 to 90 days just for things to correct. So you may be literally, I'm not joking or embellishing here, half the leads or half the revenue your PPC campaign was making for 6 months, making one big bad move with this. So there's always that risk. There's a lot to gain, but there's also a hell of a lot to lose. It's very hard to perfect the actual whole page / site that you're trying to optimize or send people to from these campaigns at once. So, basically what I mean by that is this isn't like a one and off endeavor that you should have. Now, of course, it technically could be a lot of times, and I've even done it many times myself, where you're just redo a landing page totally from scratch, you launch it, you're done. You're not going to get as much value out of that most of the time, unless you already know exactly what kind of stuff works, like, I don't want to, again, toot my own horn here, but I've tested hundreds and hundreds of things already, so I kind of know when I do a landing page, most of the stuff that should be on there anyway. For somebody who hasn't done that, you're not going to know everything on that page. The best thing that you hope for is that you get, an increase in response rate, and then you could go through the rest of these actions here for yourself. I'll give you what kind of the default stuff that works, so you can just right away go ahead and get ahead. But then there's individual things that you'll individually test on that page, and then in a certain order that kind of works the best that I use if I am going to take it the rest of the way, that you should do. And so it's not a matter of just, here's a new landing page. Does it work or not? Okay, great, I'm done. Or here's a page. Does it work? Great. Okay, well, let's try a whole different page. Does that work? Great. No. Take a page. If it works better, test individual components on that page to get the full benefit out of that page. You're not going to take a risk of going backwards really with that, majorly. And if you're going to go all through the effort of doing it, might as well get the extra. If you got a 25% bump in conversion rates on your page, might as well be getting the 50% by going through the rest of these little small checks in the process as well, and just carry it out the rest of the way. You found, when that new page works, you found a nugget of gold. Why not, if you were digging and you found some gold in the ground, you would certainly keep digging and find the rest of the gold in that general area, would you not? This is kind of the same way. And then you should break the parts, so to do that, you should break the page into parts, testing each one by one. So, in science in general, and you're testing a landing page, this is science, you're going to test one thing at a time, so you can have a control group and a test group. All these things I'm mentioning here that you're going to test one by one, you're only going to do one at a time. But I'm going to give you the order that you should typically test, so you're going to get as much results as quickly in the process as possible, and as well as much results overall as possible from that page that you come up with, that it puts you in the general direction of better results once you find it. If you don't find it, you try another page, or you go out and find somebody who can make a landing page that understands all this stuff and has a lot of experience with it. Once you have that, then you can go through this testing process and get the rest out of it, again, which is probably double on top of whatever you got already originally, on top of the initial gain, if you get my point. If you got another 25%, well, you'll get 50 once you went through the rest of these, and even without a ton of experience, just, with some basic understanding or some common sense, we'll just put it that way, to apply and use these tests I'm going to give you to take it the rest of the way. So what you should actually test first? For the quickest results, test and for all practical purposes, you're going to test the biggest things first, not only because you want quick wins, but you're going to take the big thing and then you're going to add finer tune adjustments to the overall big thing. What I mean by that, so there's a distinct list that I actually follow, and I am going to take a landing page and test it that I follow, and this is actually what it is, literally speaking. I first start off with the overall design. I call it a radical page design. So you're going to, again, the whole landing page, everything on it, you're going to test it, come up with something totally new, test it. I recommend going to somebody who understands, again, landing pages, a landing page specialist who understands conversion psychology. Yes, you're going to think it costs a crap load of money to do that, whether they charge you $3,000 or $6,000 or 50, even if it's 15 grand. I know that you might be falling off your chair right now. If you're making 20 grand a month on your ads, they're going to be able to pump that up to most likely 40 to 50 grand a month just with that one page. You pay for it in a month. There's literally no point in not doing this, but for some reason, I think I obviously know what it is. People don't recognize what kind of increase in returns they're going to get from this kind of stuff. And it's not an embellishment. I do this all the time. Landing pages are my favorite thing because I can take a campaign, quickly bump it with basically no work other than a new page, and then I can start to get paid. So you test the overall design. Again, once you have something that works, I would say if it at least gets a 25% increase conversion rate off of your current page, then you stop testing the overall radical design. If not, you didn't get 25%, test another one. Try to probably hire somebody if you really if you've never done all this stuff before. Otherwise, try it yourself first, see if you can do it, of course, and if you at least have your other option. The second thing you're going to test, though, is what they call above the fold. Above the fold is a newspaper term that's from the newspaper era. It's before you scroll on the landing page, that's called above the fold. It's what you see right away without scrolling. And with that, if you're running search campaigns and you're testing those, here are the 3 things that you're going to test right away. Above the fold, in which above the fold is the first thing you test besides the whole page by itself. The first thing and most important thing is the headline. I've talked about many times in my other videos of building search campaigns. Every single campaign that I build, I do an ad for every keyword. As ridiculous as that seems, I get massive results from that. Nobody else is wanting to or willing to do it, so I get all the results. But with that, I take the keyword and I put it in the headline. Now, if you haven't done that yet, I recommend doing that first, because that's an absolute guarantee that will work and get you another 40%. Roughly speaking, more conversions, just that. You of course have to make a page copy for every keyword you have, and you can use one page for quite a few different keywords, a lot of times 5 to 10 keywords, but you get the general idea there. But with the headline itself, besides that, if you've done that already, or if you can't do that, that's the first thing I would test. But for the most part, if you put the keyword in the headline, you don't need to test it. That's what you would do first. Easy 40% every time you do this. Second thing is the call to actions. So usually above the fold, you have a call to action right there. A form, or a button to go scroll to a form, or a button to pop up a form, and then you have telephone number up right. So they have basically 2. But whatever, specifically for like that form, you'll see people say, get a free quote. Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, get a free quote is boring. Find out how much of a disability credit you can get versus get a free consultation, or find out how much time you're looking at. If you're a lawyer, I'm like, why don't people do this? I don't know, maybe you can't do that, but if I was a lawyer, I know I could get literally twice as many people to fill that form out if I'm actually telling them what they're going to get versus what everybody else is saying. So that's such a massive difference in results you'll get from that. What you're doing is you're putting it as verbose as possible terms, what it is that they get by filling that form out, as they call it, call to action, or basically text that asks them to fill out the form that goes right above the form or whatever. Same thing with the phone number. You can have, get a quote versus just a telephone number. That'll give you a small bump. Not like the form there, or call to action, as I mentioned just a bit ago. Then, of course, the third thing that I'll test, and again, everything I'm talking about here, go in this exact order. It seems to work the best for me. If you just want simple, good, clean results, just go in this order. It'll work for you. The subheadline. So you have the headline, and then usually have a headline underneath it or some text. That's the third thing you'll test in order there, and that's the final thing you'll actually test above the fold. Usually the headline tells the person you're in the right place, so that's why the keyword in the headline works, and then underneath it, it tells you what it is that basically you're going to get by dealing with us specifically, or we're going to give you, free boxes for your move if you call us. And then your call to actions next to it that says, claim your free boxes. Again, specific here. So anyway, that's for that. Moving on, what do you next test? After you got all the gains you can get out of that, make the whole page itself a little longer or shorter, specifically while checking lead quality. So sometimes a long landing page works better for what niche we're in. Sometimes a shorter one does. It depends on how much information the user needs. There's a key thing to all this. There isn't how long should my page be. Each niche it's a little different, and if you provide too much information, you'll hurt your conversion rates. If you provide too little information, you'll hurt your conversion rate. So there's a sweet spot. And so literally speaking, you're going to test making it longer or shorter. Within that, usually the landing page format that I always use because it works so routinely well, above the fold, like I mentioned already, and then there's a section here, it's got a white background, then you have a colored background section, and then a white background section, so it's just like in blocks. And we'll use 2 blocks and then the footer, or 3 blocks and then the footer, or 4 blocks in the footer, and specifically within that, you could shorten up the page by having, like, instead of a whole gallery that shows your installs of the different roofs you've installed, you will have a couple pictures instead of a grid of 12, and then a link that says see our full portfolio. So you can skinny up the page, or you can, of course, it's the other way around. People will want to see more on the page. So there's actually making the individual sections greater or lesser in length, which is a second kind of thing I would test. What you first test is how many blocks of text you need for your niche, and find out where's the sweet spot there. So that's the easy thing to test. Of course, seeing if they need more information or less. The next thing on the list to test, once you've got all the gains there, the primary / secondary / tertiary color scheme. So normally speaking, if you didn't hear of it or know of it yet, if you're working with a web design firm that's competent, they should have been told you or gave you a site that has contrasting color scheme at the opposite ends of the color wheel. So blue and red, blue and green, green and red, something like that. With that, blue is like the general color that, as far as the primary color of the site, that works the best because it instills trust and authority. You see a lot of sites with that. But if you just want a general hint of what works on a landing page, just do a blue color scheme or a green color scheme. And then the call to actions on the page will be in like gold or an orange color or a red color, because that draws the eye to what you want them to do. So they're on the page, they're calm because they see the blue. I would stick with blue, and then their eyes drawn to the call to action, and then they read the call to action, which now you've got it set up so it's very, very descriptive. You hit the button, you're done. So to test the color scheme is pretty easy. You just change, obviously, instead of everything green on the page, change it to blue. And that one thing right there can probably get you 10% to 20%, because blue as a whole works better than green. Green makes people think of money. If it's in a finance space and you're talking about getting loans, you'll see a lot of sites with green. That's for a reason. Look at other sites in your niche. Pull from what they, everything will usually converge if it's a big money niche. If it's not, what you see out there is probably random, just to be honest. If you're in like crime scene repair, there's not enough money in that space. No, I know there's millions of dollars to be made. No, don't get me wrong. Tons of money, millions of years in just running the ads and PPC in your market and dominating it still. But there's no $50 million a year company that has a really good ad firm that is going to test this stuff, and multiple of them, where you would be able to just, instead of having to have your own research, you just use theirs. So it gives you an idea of when you need to use outside help or just look at your competitor stuff. So, but that was what I would test next. Basically, once you have the general framework of the page worked out, then you work on the color scheme. You can't work on the color scheme first because the color scheme also kind of, just in terms of the order, like if you test the color scheme first, then you go back and test this later on, then the tests you do here won't mesh well, if you get my point here. So there's a reason also in terms of the order, in terms of not backtracking on previous tests you made, in terms of the specific order I've given you here. Without getting in all the details on all of that, I will just leave it at that. Next thing, call to action. You're testing the call to actions. The color of the call to action I already talked about, for a gimme. If you want to keep things simple, not overthink it, use gold or orange or red call to action for the buttons of what they click on, for the form itself, on the border of the form, so on and so forth. If you're, those are 3 colors I gave you. So if you're using orange now, definitely try red. If you're using red now, definitely try orange. If you're using orange now, try a gold or orange, not gold because it's hard to see on a white background. And with that, anything on a landing page where you don't have high contrast, meaning if you're using a white background, don't screw around, use black text. If you have a black background, don't screw around, use white text. If you have a blue background, it better be dark enough so that white text, when it's on it, is contrasted enough that you do not have to squint at all. It's really hard for young people to see. And if you have an older demographic, forget about it. And on top of that, if you have an older demographic, don't screw around with text that's too small. Don't also screw around with fonts that are too flowery or creative. Stick with the gold standard's Arial font. I like to use like a Myriad Pro type font. Not exactly that, but fonts like that, Helvetica. Stuff that's going to be easy to read, but don't get too much crazier than that. And if you are now, test the font definitely. Also, if you think it's too small and it's under 12 point now, test 12 point. Probably get a boost from that as well. You could test that about the time that you're doing this color scheme testing. Anyway, back to the call to actions though. The second thing, the text on the call to action. Like I said here, you're going to change the call to action text anyway. But once you've got that there and you understand how this works, when it's more verbose and specific to what the benefit is of taking that call to action, instead of, find out how much time you have. If you're a criminal lawyer, see if the prosecutor has a case. Again, I don't know if you could do this, but everybody understands criminal law, so I just throw that formula out there. Test that, test 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of those. When you get that one down, find out what works the best there. Test less or different form fields. So on the form, there's always a thing. If you add more form fields, you usually get better quality lead, and if it's less, you have lesser quality lead overall, but you'll have more leads. Sorry, drew a blank for a second. With that said, if you usually can get by if you have more than 3 fields, I recommend doing a multi-step form. Most landing page tools like Unbounce have it to where you can it'll say, please enter your phone and email, and then you'll click submit, and then it'll go to the second list. So at least you got the key information, there, or in company, so that and then if they fill out the rest in the next 2 steps, then that's great, it's gravy, but you're also getting the benefit of getting their information in case they don't. That balances the best of both worlds, I think, there. Unless your salespeople are overwhelmed and then you just don't care, you just have more form fields. That's one way to optimize the profit you're making in terms of salespeople and staff that you have. That's obviously has its own cost. And so you're trying to balance. You look at when you make a change to the form fields, how that affects leads and how many leads are coming out the other side of your sales funnel to see what's the cutoff point in terms of how many form fields to optimize profit as much as possible. So that'll be a little tricky for you to look into, but a lot of the higher end companies that do a lot of volume do that, just as a general general rule of thumb, and a word about what is out there and what's going on. So check and like with this, and I forgot to mention up here, when you make the page longer or shorter, the lead quality, you may get more leads, but the lead could be less quality if there's less information, just as a general rule of thumb as well. Whereas if it's longer, they pre-qualify themselves more. So when you get on the phone, they're more qualified. They might close at a higher rate, but less of them will respond because they have now gotten more information. They're more satisfied in a general sense. So you should look at the lead quality when you test the page length, but also look at the lead quality right away for sure when you test the different amount of form fields. The last thing here under call to action is more or less call to actions itself. So that's rule of standard, like a rule of thumb or general standard of what I use on a landing page is a call to action at the top of the page and bottom of the page. So that once they get to the bottom, they've scrolled through it all. Okay, I don't have to do anything. I can react here. Some people won't look through any of it. They're just like, I want to buy now. Don't screw around with me. And you have it up top. Sometimes it'll work particularly if you have a longer page, 1 or even 2 different call to actions in the middle. Last part about the call to actions. Sometimes 1 or 2 call to actions in the middle of the page can also help. by default, we're using one at the top of the page and one at the bottom. The call to actions generally will be similar all the way through the page most of the time. So I wouldn't really try to test switching up the different call to actions, say different things too much. Other than you might say, "Are you ready to now?" Whatever you're offering in the middle of the page that's kind of worked for me a time or two, and I've tried that a time or two. But in general, if you don't want to overthink it, just the same call to action throughout the page. But the number of call to actions does matter sometimes, based upon, especially the longer the page, the more likely call to actions that are not just at the top or the bottom of the page will help. And so you can add them. And I usually in the middle page, the call to actions at the middle of the page, when you click on it, goes down to the bottom form, just automatically scrolls down to the bottom call to action at the bottom of the page, i.e. a form. Same thing with if there's multiple, right? And so you'll have to test which one works for you. The next thing on the list you are going to test is the body headline. So, but body headline, as I mentioned kind of before earlier in the video, on a landing page, generally what you have is, if you just follow the formula that most people use, and it works, for me basically, and that I use every time, you have your above the fold section, and then you have, like if that has a colored background, you use another section directly below it that has a white background, and then there's a section below it that has a colored background, so you can visually, as you scroll down this page, understand right away without having to think that this section, okay, this is a different section. Okay, this is a different section. Okay, this is a different section. So you could scroll down. You're initially scrolling and you're seeing, okay, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that. Okay, I'm interested in that, but I'm not interested. So once they get to the information they're looking for, it's all packaged up in that one place. But each section, generally speaking, it'll mostly always work the best if you have a headline describing what that section is, so that in that process they can pick up what it is that section is about, if it's not, without just relying on the text and the images there to be relatively apparent of what it is right away. And so with that though, if you're not using headlines for each of those sections and you have a landing page that's styled like that now, then you're going to put headlines in there. You're probably going to get a bump in your conversion rates, 10% right there. Once you've done that, or if you have it already, you're going to test the headlines, and you're going to test something a little bit more creative for the headline versus something more I want to say boring, but something that's less fancy, or it basically just literally describes what the section is. So ultimately, with that, you test one at a time. Once you find out what works with one, you'll test the other one, find out what works there the best. Taking what you learned from the first one you tested, if something more creative or something more dry worked, and then you use that learning for the second one, and then for each section you're going to test them until you've tested them all, starting from the highest one you have all the way down. So once you've done that, the last thing to always test is the body copy. Of course, you could take what you learned about those headlines and testing those, if the more dry version of the headline or the more creative version worked best, depending on what market you're in, and the audience is what will be different based upon what market you're in as well. Of course, different people buy ideally different ways as far as the copywriting goes, or i.e. the text. The body copy, you're going to do a similar thing there. Right away, first of all, if you haven't used a copywriter that charges at least $100 an hour freelance rate, hire one, have them rewrite the copy on your page. You probably get 20 to 50% more conversion rate on the page just from that, instead of from winging it sort of to somebody who that's all they do. And you're going to have them rewrite the whole page. Once you find a winner there, you'll have a mini version of everything we just did here, where each section itself, if you got other smaller text above the fold in that section, you'll test that first. Test a more creative version versus a drier version. Whatever works there, take that learning. Do just the second block of content. Do a couple versions of the text there. Once you find out what works there, again, probably have one dry version, one more creative version. Or if you know for sure just more creative, at that point is going to work the best. And a couple different versions of the creative text there. One that is way, way more creative, or one that's in the middle, let's just say. Then you do your third section, the text there, testing that, your fourth, and then your bottom. So first overall, then each section. That's how you're going to get the full amount of conversion rate out of your landing page that you're going to be using for years and years after you've done this. And so I always tell people, if you're going to work so hard delivering your products and services, why not make a whole bunch of money at it by going ahead and doing this? This stuff is not easy, but it's not logistically impossible to do to where it doesn't take much of your time. And I can tell you right now that it works. So why don't you go ahead and do it? You're going to be using this in a PPC campaign that works well, generally works with, you have to keep on top of it, but for 5-10 years in the future, you'll be able to use this page a lot of times once it's done. Why not get the 200 to 500% increase of conversion rates you could get versus winging it versus doing it the right way and going through all this process here that I've had to try out the hard way to figure out for you to be able to use. Figured out over 15 years testing hundreds of landing pages. The type of process that works without having to go through that all that hard work and heartache of trying a bunch of stuff that doesn't work for yourself. Hope you also got something out of the kind of the default stuff that works. So when you do test this stuff, you right away know what to test, kind of. But anyway, with that all said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I have a lot of other videos like this that goes over other money-making PPC strategies on this channel. You should check those out if you're into those. I also got a blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog where I go step-by-step into different PPC campaign setups that personally make money for me and our clients, in which we have to guarantee results for our clients so you could use those for yourself as well, just like I gave you my strategy here. Apart from that, if you have any questions or anything that you think I should have covered about landing page testing and what order to test things in first, leave a comment below. I always get back to people that leave comments on my channel here. But apart from that, hopefully that inspired you to do some landing page testing for yourself, and of course was entertaining for you while watching this video as well. So hope you enjoyed. So when they click the button, it goes and automatically scrolls down to the bottom of the page where the form is. If your call to action text is good, that a lot of times will pick up conversion rates all in itself. So you could test adding a couple more, and then of course I would use whatever text you have that work good for each of the middle page call to actions as well, just as a general idea about that, about what you can what you can use with those extra call to actions to get the maximum lift from what you just did there. The next thing you're going to test in order is the body headline. So body headline is just a headline so I mentioned on a landing page, the general formula you follow is like above the fold section, and then there's a section with a white background with some text and images, and then there's a colored background, a darker colored background that physically splits up the sections. So when you get to the next section, you know you're at a different section now. And then you see another section potentially, which is a white background, but has a different set of content in it. And each of those, like white color, however many you have, each one should have its own headline. That generally works better than just having text and images. So if you don't have headlines, add it, test it, know that that was the right move for you, because it's not guaranteed, but almost every time. And then once you've done that, of course, now you have something in place where you can test what those headlines say. So this is the time to test those headlines. Sometimes being a little bit craftier there works, sometimes just not being crafty and stating and being dry, depending on the type of audience and market you're in, will work better. So try it both ways. Then the next thing, we're down to the last thing here, is to test the body copy. So once you've done all of that, you're going to test the actual copywriting, other words, text on that page. This is everything but the headlines, basically. So like the overall design where you tested everything, and then once you found an everything overall page that worked good, and we wanted to get the rest of what we can get out of it with all these other smaller tests in succession, the copywriting, I would recommend changing the complete tone of the copywriting. Again, could be more like witty and then more dry, and find out which of those works better. Of course, if you haven't used a copywriter, a professional copywriter that charges at least $100 an hour, freelance rate, use one. You'll probably get a 25-50% lift just from that alone, on top of everything else. So you could see where a 500% increase can come from the page that you just winged to something that went through all this and you invested some time and money into. But once you've done that, go and break down each individual section, and with that person you're working with to write the copy, rewrite the copy from the top, the first section underneath above the fold, or just say that if there's text above the fold, which there really shouldn't be, you test that. And then the second section, test that section, but just that section's copy. And when you got that optimized, make 2 or 3 different versions. When you have that optimized, use what you learned there to test the second section, test the copy there, third, fourth, bottom, and then you're done. So that is the end of the road there of what you need to test, how you test it, what order, what kind of results, how you're going to get those results. Hopefully that helped you get a firm footing on how to test and make a new landing page, get your initial results, and then what order and how to test things and why on that landing page to get the full benefit out of it without having to go and hire some expensive conversion rate optimization firm that charges $5,000 a month, which is about the fee what they charge. You can do a lot of this stuff yourself. If you like this video, I have a lot of other videos just like this on this channel. PPC money making strategies. You can check those out. I would encourage you to check those out. I also have on my blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog step-by-step instructions on how to run tests just like these, and more specifically how to build money making campaigns that guarantee results for our clients, and just show you how I do it for our clients, so you can also do it for yourself too. Apart from that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you had a question about landing pages or testing, leave me a comment down below. I always get back to everybody who leaves me a comment and can cover anything that you think I should have covered here, or just a general question about what I've talked about here at all, or comment. But I hope you enjoyed the video, you were entertained by what I had shown you here, and give you some ideas, again, furthermore inspiration to go out and do some actual landing page testing for yourself to get the full benefit and profit out of what you're doing for all the hard work you're doing at your company.